Welcome to My First Stage, the podcast where experienced public speakers share how they started getting booked on stages and how they've used them to grow their business. I am here with my guest, Dr. Mickey Fitch-Collins, a human skills facilitator at Learn It, who helps managers and teams build the practical workplace habits that make work better. She has been on stages since she was 14 years old, which is absolutely insane. So I'm going to get right into it because I need to know how that happened. Because at 14, if someone handed me a microphone, I would probably run out of the room faster than I do at 30. So welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
And let's get into it. How did you get started? Because you were also like a famous bass fisherman woman.
Yes. Yeah, you nailed it. Yeah. So I have, yeah, I mean, I appreciate you saying like you would have run from the room, but I have kind of a different sort of story of what I was doing, I was kind of that like one of these is not like the other sort of things of like what all of my friends were doing when they were 14, 15, 16, 17 was very different than I was doing on my evenings and weekends. So, yeah, you nailed it. I was at the time, so this is 30 years ago, but at the time I was the youngest professional bass fisherman in the United States, which if you're like, okay, bass fishing, like let's back up. Let's break this down a little bit. I'm not talking about like drowning worms under bobbers, on a farm pond or anything like this. Like if you turn on ESPN or, Sports Center, something like that, sometimes you'll see it now. There's these tournaments and stuff, guys out there, and it's mostly men, mostly Southern, mostly guys that are 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, that have the support of lots of different companies and stuff. And they're out there doing tournaments, kind of the biggest bag of 5 fish, kind of heaviest, weights that you can get. I got into this world of fishing. I started when I was a little toddler, but I got into the world of professional bass fishing because I just got connected to different people and they were like, "Hey, like you're a really good fisherman and you can talk about it. Like you like telling stories, you like helping people get better, all of this sort of stuff." And so yeah, so I'm 14 years old. I get recognized by all of these companies at the height of my career, I could say. At the height of my career, I was on the sponsorship role for 30 plus companies. I was getting a new boat every single year. I was traveling all over the place. I had a very, like I said, very different high school years because I
At
was
14.
traveling. Yeah. I'm traveling around, like going to different places, doing seminars, doing TV shows. This was before the world of podcasts. I was doing radio shows and all this sort of stuff. And I was in the room with men that were 2 or 3 or 4 times my age, and here I am up on the stage, right, telling them what they're doing wrong and what they need to do to become better fishermen. So, that was my first stage, kind of a very, not s kind of, but a very different entry story than I think most people have to the world of public speaking.
And I'm sure the men took that very well.
Uh, yeah,
They're
some,
usually really open to criticism
y yep,
and comments from
definitely from
women.
women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
no, I'm sure that was easy.
it was so interesting because I think, like, as a teenager, I just didn't have a context of, like, gender dynamics and bias and, like, all of these things that, like, as a grown adult, I'm very aware of, I talk about all the time professionally. But, yeah, I mean, I'm in these rooms and, with these, like, curmudgeonly old guys that, "I've been fishing since, blah, 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 blah," right? But what was, I think, endearing to them was, like, here's this young kid who's getting up there, like, let's give her a shot, let's give her a chance. And then I think people realize, "Oh, you actually have some value to add," right? Like, that's the thing I tell people all the time with public speaking is the identity factors are super important, but what's most important is that you're bringing value to whoever you're talking to. And that translated really quickly, but there were definitely some people in the audiences that, had a thing or two to say to me for sure.
Oh, I'm sure. And you're 14 and you're like, how do I deal with this?
Yeah.
How did
Yeah.
you deal with this?
I just kind of attacked it head on. I was like,
Mm.
like I'm going to get in these rooms and I have been asked to be here and so like that was the big thing was like people want me to be here. The folks that are organizing these events want me to be here and so that's what I'm going to roll with. And because I was speaking about something that I'm super passionate about, fishing, especially kind of helping people improve kind of this idea, this very early thread for me of teaching and learning, I just kinda, went headstrong into it, and when I got the negative feedback or the naysayers or kind of the nitpicking sort of stuff, I I was not familiar with the term growth mindset at that time. I don't know if anybody was talking about growth mindset yet, right? But I really looked at it as a growth mindset sort of thing of like everything that people are telling me I can learn something from, and I probably could get better. And there probably is some form of truth in what that person's saying. And also, people are jerks, right? Like people are saying things because they're defensive or they're recognizing their own weakness or something. And so I just kind of took it in stride.
I love that. So when I was like 27 or 28, I was at a conference as a speaker, and this woman looks me dead in the eye and says, "What could I possibly learn from you at your age?" I'm like, "Nothing."
Right.
Because if that's your mindset, then there is nothing that I could possibly teach you, and I'm okay with that. That's on you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, it's on the individual learner of, like, what are they gonna be open to? Yeah.
yeah, like people could I'm sure there was so much that they could learn from you when you were 14. There's so much that they can learn from you now. And me when I was 27, 28, everything that I was there talking about, everything that I was teaching was from my personal experience, which you can't recreate that no matter what age you are.
I
And
know.
I think that's like, I love what you said. It's not about the age, it's about the value that you're bringing, and being
Yeah,
able to remember that is so important because it doesn't matter what age you are, everybody has value to bring.
absolutely.
So now you are no longer 14.
Yes.
I'm guessing.
As it turned out, I aged.
I'm not good at guessing ages. I'm really bad at that game. But you are no longer 14, and you are still getting on stages. You're still speaking. Just I'm assuming not about fish.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I talk about fishing for funsies now. But yeah, I am in my mid 40s now, and yeah, what I do, I work for an organization called Learn It, and my job, as I tell people, like my job is to help other people get better at their jobs. And so what we do is we provide a lot of upskilling opportunities. Kind of, we sit in this world of what is the human advantage in the age of AI, and so I teach workshops every single day to all sorts of different industries, all sorts of different folks, all across kind of the hierarchy food chains of different organizations. Things like critical thinking, things like problem solving, dealing with conflict, communication skills, certainly AI skills, but all of these sort of human skills that we need to have to better ourselves as individuals as well as better ourselves in the workplace. And a lot of that, for me, yes, this is my work, but this is a call to passion, right? Like this is, to me, the culmination. This is my second professional career, I guess. If you counted the fishing stuff in there, you could call it my third career. But it is such a wonderful opportunity because we're at a stage in our world, in our economy, in what we define as work, where everybody is really looking at their own skill sets and saying, like, how do I continue to improve and grow? And that's exactly the space that I love to be.
I love that. And what are some of those skills that, as a public speaker, people really need to focus on and hone?
Yeah. I think the biggest one with public speaking is most people focus in on becoming a better planned public speaker, right? Like, oh, I have this presentation I'm going to give in 2 weeks, or I'm going to present at this conference in a couple of months. That's the stuff that most people think about and they zone in on. And that's good stuff, right? Like, that's absolutely good stuff to focus in on. But the thing that I think most people fail to work on at all or enough is the impromptu speaking, right? Like the speaking on our feet, speaking on the cuff, like this type of conversation, right? And the skill set associated with impromptu speaking, there's a couple of different pieces. Number one is how do you be succinct, right? How do you be short? Nobody's asking you to give your 45 minutes, 17 bullet point answer to something. How do you bring value in that conversation? And then how do you do so in a way that projects confidence, right? Because it's a balance of competence and confidence. And so that's the thing I always tell people is like focus your efforts, not that you shouldn't focus on the pre-planned presentation and how do I create the best slide deck and how do I make sure that I have this really great delivery and all this sort of stuff. But what impresses people the most is when we're in meetings, when we're at a coffee shop, when we're at a gathering of friends or neighbors, and somebody can speak on their feet in a way that's really eloquent and makes a ton of sense, isn't rambling, isn't going on and on, all of that sort of stuff. So focus on impromptu speaking skills.
I love that. I think one of the things that I remember about one of my earlier stages that I was on was I was speaking at this conference, and I got interrupted very early by people that had questions,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Okay, like, I'll just start taking questions now and, like, just continue that way," and people even came up and told me how much more comfortable I looked once I started taking questions, because I was, like, still new to public speaking, and I'm still not a fan of it, honestly, but I was, like, terrified of it, and in my mind, it's like, I can stand here and, like, give you my slides and, like, read off of index cards and stuff, but that just means that I know how to memorize. But if
Right.
you ask me questions and I'm able to answer them without preparation, that's how I feel like I was able to prove that I knew what I was doing. Like, I knew what I was
Yeah.
talking about. So suddenly it's like I don't feel like I'm up here trying to prove myself. I already did that. So now, like, I can go on with, like, my presentation. And I don't know, something about that, like, impromptu piece of it was so helpful for me as the speaker.
Yeah. Well, there's something so, genuine and vulnerable and, as humans, like, we love seeing that in other people, right? Because it helps us feel connected to that other person, but it also that genuineness and that vulnerability also translates honesty, right?
Mhm.
If that person and in those moments, right, we're figuring out, does this person actually know what they're talking about? Like, can they give examples? Do they have experience, right? Like, we're going through all of this sort of stuff. And essentially what it is it's a trust building interaction or transaction that we're having. And when we feel like we're getting the real deal, like when we feel like we're getting the honest truth from somebody, as opposed to like, yeah, like here's my slide deck and these pre-prepared wonderful sentences and all of this sort of stuff. You know, Anybody can do that stuff. Only some people can really do the impromptu speaking that makes people go, "Oh, wow," right? Or, "Ooh, I wanna know more," or, "Ooh, I really wanna go up and talk with her afterwards," or something. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, as an adult going on stages and everything, and you've had a lot of practice, you've been doing this basically your entire life. Are there times that you get off stage and think like there's things I should have done differently, and what are those kinds of things?
Oh, yeah, 100% of the time, and that's the thing, and I'm sure you feel this way too, is, like, if you ever get into those moments where you're not nervous and you're not reflective afterwards, like, you need to throw all the microphones away and never get on stage again, right? Like, you just that's the growth mindset piece. I actually spend some time after every single one of my kind of, like, bigger sort of speaking engagements, and I take some notes, like, within the first 2 hours after that of, like, taking some notes down about things that I remember that I wanna do differently, right? And it's natural as human beings, we always go to like, "Oh, what didn't go well? What should I do differently?" All of that sort of stuff, but also making sure to take notes down of, "This is what really resonated with the audience. People really reacted positively when I did this. I felt really good when I did this." Um for me, a lot of those things, are, I oscillate between doing a lot of virtual work. About 95% of the work that I do is virtual. So when I do get in person, I'm a big extrovert, as you can probably tell. So when I get in person with folks, sometimes I might be a little bit too much right, for people, and so I think a lot of my reflection is, how do I use my body in the spaces? How am I filling the spaces? How am I utilizing the physical spaces? How am I making sure that I'm not being too much for some of the people in the audience, but also staying true to kind of what my brand and my presence is? So that's one of the things right now, kind of at this stage in my life, that I'm thinking a lot about, is kind of like, how do I show up differently in those virtual spaces versus those in person spaces? One of the other things that I oftentimes think about too is my storytelling. I love to tell stories, and I am at a place in life and career that I have a boatload of stories to go with most every single
Pun
topic that I
intended.
talk about. Yeah, right, boatload, there you go. Yeah. Um, and, uh, and I think about, how I try to take in those cues from people in the audience, right? Those nonverbal cues. How well did this story resonate? How quickly was I able to tell the story and get to the point? If it was a joke, did the punchline land, right? So those sort of things, I think about stories and how I can use stories in, like, I'm speaking in a business context and how to help people improve their organizations and their teams and stuff. And so, like, are the stories that I'm presenting really landing with these particular audiences? Or do I need to kind of mine my experiences for additional stories to make that better? So those are the two big things that I really focus in on is kind of the presentation presence, right? Of I don't mean presence like gifts, I mean like presence like how I'm showing up in spaces, and then also how are my stories resonating with my audiences. But
Well,
yes, it's absolutely essential to have a reflection process. It's not enough, and this is the thing that I think is dangerous, is it's not enough to just rely on the people that come up to you afterwards to say something or, the satisfaction survey smile sheet sort of thing that people, "Well, what did you think of this speaker?" Like, it's not enough for us to rely on that stuff because that stuff's inherently biased.
true. And from what you said before, like you can show up and you can be a lot. And I think, in the words of the sage of our generation, Elise Myers, if I'm too much, go find less.
Yes, I love her. I love her.
Same.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Obsessed.
Yeah, and I do think about that is like, I have gotten that feedback from folks of like, "Wow, like, Mickey, like, your energy and, all this sort of stuff," and I'm like, "Yep." And I am a transparent human being, right? Like, this is who I am, and this is how I show up. And if it doesn't work for you, like, I'm happy to find you somebody who's dry and rigid and kind of stoic in the way that they present. They can present the same information as me. That's not me though, and I'm not going to change to be a lesser form of who I am. So yeah, if you don't like me, go find somebody else.
Love it. Love it. And we like you. So stay
Yeah,
who you are.
right
Um,
on.
no, I love that. Is there anything, because you said that some of the skills that you work on with people are like the AI skills.
Yeah.
Is there anything, like any specific like AI tool, AI anything? Because I know we we're on stage, we're speakers, we want to be authentic, we don't wanna be AI created,
Right.
and there's so much going on right now of like, is this even a real person? Are there some tools that you have used that have been helpful, to help with, like, anything stage related without
Oh,
overdoing it and becoming AI generated?
yes, yes, absolutely. I'm so glad that you asked me that because that's one of the things that I think for anybody who's working, whether it's impromptu speaking or pre-planned speaking, using AI as a presentation coach is so valuable, right? I have had the opportunity. I've had some speaking coaches. I've done some vocal coaching, like all this sort of stuff, because this is the work that I do. But most people don't have access to a person like yourself or, a coach to be able to help with that. And if they do, that's great, but we need to be able to continuously work on this. And so what I do, couple of things that I would offer out to folks. A couple of different things that I do is when I am practicing, in fact, I have a big presentation that I'm going to be giving to a client in person at the end of next month. And so one of the things that I'm doing right now, and it's a pretty high stakes presentation, it's a pretty high stakes crowd that I'm with. So I really want to make sure that I'm nailing my content, but also nailing the delivery. Okay. So, one of the things that I am doing right now to begin the preparations, I have my slide deck. I know the things that I want to talk about. And so, what I'm doing is, at home in my office here, is I am recording myself, video, audio, and slides, doing that full recording and I'm doing it multiple times over, like in different iterations, right? So, like, I did it 2 weeks ago, and then I did it last week, and I'm going to do it again this week. And what I'm doing with those recordings then is I am uploading it, and I'm using a couple of different tools, all the big name ones, Claude, ChatGPT, all this sort of stuff. And what I'm doing is I'm prompting the tool to act as a presentation coach for me. And I want it to point out areas that I need to improve, whether it's my pronunciation, my speech rate, the examples that I'm giving, how quickly I'm moving, slow, all this sort of stuff. Basically, I'm telling it to like rip me apart, right? And I'm asking it to give me timestamps so that I can go back in the recording of the video and not just, I don't want it to just be like, you did a good job of giving examples. I'm like, no, 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 give me receipts, right? So at minute 18:43, right? When you said blah, 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 whatever it is. And so what I'm doing is I'm loading that in there. And now that I have a few different recordings of myself doing it, I'm asking it to cross compare between recording number 1 and recording number 3. What are you noticing as the positive changes and the negative changes, right? And what's great about this is, again, I'm able to do this whenever I wanna do it, right? I'm able to get this feedback, and I can engage in a conversation with the AI tool to be able to say, like, "Give me some more examples of what this is," or "What do you think I ought to do when?" or whatever that is. And I love that because it's I mean, people talk about AI as a democratizer of learning and development, right? And this is a fantastic way for us to be able to use an AI tool to become better presenters. So that's a great example from my own personal life of how I'm using AI as a presentation coach.
I'm like amazed
Yeah?
about just how much like work and effort that you put into these presentations. And meanwhile, I just got home yesterday from Vegas. I was there for a conference and I was speaking, and I was creating my slides the night before I went on stage, and then
Sure.
even that day, was changing my slides during the talk like, during other people's talks, like, I was
Yeah.
changing slides based on what was, like, happening, and I got up on stage, and I had no idea what was gonna come out of my mouth, and I don't know what came out of my mouth because honestly, I black out a little bit when I'm on stage, but the fact that you spend all of this time and put all this effort in to make sure that what you're doing is hitting is insane a little bit, but in a
It
good way.
is. Yeah. Yeah, no, right on. You nailed it. You absolutely nailed it.
It's like we
It is,
definitely have 2 very different brains.
yeah. Well, to be clear, I also do what you do, right? Like I also do, these last minute iterations, right? Like there'll be something when I get to that client site and that morning or the night before or something like that, I'm going to change something up, whatever that is. And so I want to be very clear. Like it's not about like this rigidity of like you must say it this way and you must do it this way.
Of course.
Two things can be true. And I think the thing about it is like I come back to again that authenticity and the value. Like
Mhm,
those are the two things. Yes, do I have objectives for what I want people to take away from the presentation or the talk? Is there a feeling I want people to have? Is there a call to action? Absolutely. How I get there, I mean, it's like a road trip, right? Like, here's the roads I think I'm gonna take to get
yeah.
there, but like I might like detour and take this like little country bumpkin road and, like stop at this shop for a little while. And that's totally cool, right? Like, so I mean, two things can be true. I think you describing that, I'm like, we both could get up on a stage and give just an absolutely like knockout, incredible presentation. And what's important is that I think the audience, again, whether or not they're looking at you or me and being like preparedness, blah, 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 whatever, the authenticity, the genuineness, the transparency. And again, the biggest thing is like, what value are you creating for your audience? Like, what's in it for them? And did you check that box, right? Like, are people walking away being like, dang, I got some good stuff from that? That's what matters. That's what counts. But
100%.
yeah, it is a little insane. You nailed it.
And I mean that with all of the respect in the world,
Totes.
and
Yeah.
I actually so this past one that I did, I I was one of the last speakers of the event, and
Oof.
that was good and bad. Like, it's always hard to, like, go towards the end.
Yes.
And this was like a 2-day, very like it was a small, very intimate event, so everyone basically stayed for the whole thing, which is good. Especially because the last speaker absolutely killed it, and if anyone missed that, like, I feel bad for them. But one of the speakers that went on, like, 2 people ahead of me, it was Nick Hutchison. He created, Book Thinkers,
Yeah.
and he is phenomenal, and he was talking about the power of video and why we need to be creating video in our social content, and I was talking about podcasting, and so much of what he said is exactly what I was gonna say because he does video podcasts, the fundamentals are the same. So
Yeah.
I just deleted half of my slides and just made a
Mhm.
new slide for the first one that come up, put his headshot on it, and just wrote what Nick said.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what that probably did in that moment is it immediately endeared the audience to you because like they're looking at you and saying, "I'm not competing and I'm not gonna say no to this, but I'm gonna add different types of value. I'm going to build upon this or I'm going to give a little bit more detail on this." And
Yeah,
like I think I mean this is kind of my own perspective and kind of hot take on things, but like the more in context, whether it's conferences, big conferences, small intimate events, whatever it is, the more continuity that you can see from speaker to speaker, the story that's becoming woven in those events, and the less that people are competing with one another, right? Like, there's enough competition everywhere else in our life. If we can
Yes.
go to an event and be like, "Wow, these people are really collaborative one another. Everybody's really trying to build each other up. Everybody's trying to help everybody else become better versions of themselves." Like, that's the type of events we need more of those events. Like, we need more of those types of
100%.
rather than like, "Yeah, that presentation earlier today by XYZ, yeah, that's all bunk. That's a bunch of junk. Don't pay any attention to that. Rip out your notes, delete the file, right? I'm gonna tell you exactly how to do it." Ugh, right? Like, that is far too commonplace, I think, in what we have right now. So I love that you were super additive. And also, it comes back to the impromptu speaking piece, right? You had this idea of like, "Here's all the stuff I'm gonna talk about," and then it was like, "Scrap that. Let's do something different." And that's awesome because again, you provided value to your audience.
It was funny because I just get I'm like, "So he already did the hard work for me. You guys are all now 100% on board that y'all need video, and you know exactly why. So let's just think about it as a podcast." I was, like, terrified going after him just because of how fantastic he did, so, but it was a lot of fun. Is there anything that, because clearly you do all of this preparation before, when you get off stage, what do you do then? Like, is there anything that you do afterwards? I know you said that you, like, write some notes, and anything that, like, other people should be doing after they got off stage?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, definitely, the debrief, kind of reflection exercise. I think even the best public speakers get eager to be done, right? And the problem is when we're eager to be done that we are trying to get away from that stage and that microphone as quickly as possible, you're missing some really important opportunities, right? So I think the reflection piece, and it doesn't have to be within the first 2 hours. I'm just thinking about our brains sometimes like, if you're moving on to other parts of an event or you're, going out to dinner or something like that, your brain's going to get filled up with other stuff, right? So that's why I think like the reflection piece is super important. The other thing that I think is incredibly important, and again, it's easy for me to say this as an extroverted individual. I recognize that this is really hard for other folks, but is to take time to connect with your audience afterwards. If there are people that are lingering, like my rule, it's kind of you might have heard of this before, but like the Disney rule, like with the Disney characters, their rule is that if a child comes up and hugs them, is that they release when the child releases, right? And when I first learned that, I was like, number 1, that's amazing, right? Is that like I mean, and you see these videos all the time, right? Of like, Snow White's been hugging this kid for like 16 minutes. And it's like, yep, like that's their rule, is like they let go and the child let goes. To me, with public speaking is I'm done with the audience when the audience is done with me. Not because "Oh, I was paid for my 60 minutes and, I'm out the door," or whatever. Like, some people are like that, but to me, I'm like, you never know who's in that audience and what connections you're gonna make, what business opportunities are gonna connect. If you're gonna end up working for that person's gonna end up working for you, they're gonna be your next client, whatever it is. So I always kinda go the Disney route of, like, connect with your audience afterwards. If you're up on a stage, get down on the floor, walk around the tables, say hi to people. You could go the old school route of like, handing out business cards or QR code, whatever it is, right? But connect with people and not just like, "Hey, do you have any questions?" But, "Do you have any feedback for me?" Right? Like,
Mhm.
is there anything that you could offer to me, right? Because sometimes people like, "Oh, wow, like you're asking me?" And they would give you some of that feedback. I have found that they're not gonna spend time, like, typing into some eval form that's gonna go back to the conference and whatever. "Oh, but I really liked when you did this. Oh, this was really good," whatever that is. So I think connecting with your audience is a big thing. I mean, the other thing too is I will be honest, one of the very first things that I'm doing when I get done speaking is, like, finding a cup of coffee, right? So, like, that's always my thing is, like, get a cup of coffee, sit down, roll up the sleeves, talk to people, whatever that and I think then recognizing, especially if it's in the context of an event or a conference or something like that, people now know your face, like, maybe up
Mhm.
until that point before you were just another person there, but people now have seen you up on that stage, and so recognize from that point forward, you and your brand are walking around everywhere in the rest of that event, and so I always just kinda keep that in mind is, like, people now know me as the person who talked about XYZ. So represent yourself as such.
I love that. Is there anything, because I you speak basically, it sounds like for a living, like this is part of your
Yeah.
job.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you like, any advice or any tips for getting booked on that next stage for speakers?
Yeah. A couple of different things is I think I feel I kind of hesitate saying this because it feels so like trite to say, but networking is super important, right? Um, I the number of jobs that I've gotten in my career are because of the relationships that I have with other
Mhm.
people. The same thing can be said with speaking opportunities, podcasting, writing opportunities, all this sort of stuff. I always go the route of the worst thing somebody can say to you is no. Right? And that's it, right? Like, you can ask them, like, "I would like to present at this." You could respond to I mean, if I had a dollar for every single call for proposals that I've, put in a proposal for and people have just said no, right? I mean, like, you just have to put yourself out there. So I think it's asking the question of, "Could I come speak at this event? I have this message. I have this value to deliver. Can I bring that?" And the worst thing that people can say to you is no, and then you move on. I think the other thing is to think about the connections that you have, right? And like, okay, well, now that I know this person, now that I know you, okay, well, what does that look like? Like, what are opportunities where I could say, oh, well, maybe we could do this together, or we could do this together. I might need you for this. You might want me for this. Think about your network and who is in those spaces and places. And if you know somebody that has a connection or who has done something before, hey, what are the things that would increase my odds of somebody saying yes to me to present at this event? Or how do you think I could best go about getting an invitation to to be part of this, dinner event or something like that? Asking those questions because number 1, what you're doing is you're putting your hand up and saying, "Hey, I'm interested. Hey, I wanna do this. I wanna be, I want a seat at the table, and in fact, I'm gonna bring my own chair." Right? But it also gives other people this sense of like, "Oh, okay, well, let me bring you into the fold." It gets you in their solar system or like on their radar map of you're somebody that they should keep in mind in the future. So I think the biggest thing is to make the ask, to fill the proposal, to send the email. Because again, I mean, no's suck, right? Like the rejection sucks. It's very difficult when somebody's, you're like, oh, it'd be so awesome to speak at this event. And then you get the like, thanks, no thanks email. Okay, well, you try next time. Or you say, hey, what was it about my proposal that didn't work? Right? What didn't make sense for this audience? Right. So I think that's the biggest thing. Lean into your network and I think also, one of the ways that I have gotten opportunities in the past too is when I go to different events and stuff and I started asking questions of the speaker, right? And not like in a let me poke holes in what you're talking about, but you start asking questions, right? And then all of a sudden people start looking like, who is that? Like, who's asking those questions over there? Or you go up and you talk to the presenter afterwards and you say, "Hey, like, this is who I am, and, like, here's my thoughts that I have about this. Like, maybe we could work on something together." Like, I've had stuff germinate from those sort of, conversations and those sort of efforts. And again, I recognize that is much easier to do as an extroverted individual, but I think, just thinking about each one of us has our own temperature or barometer of kind of like what are some of those things that we could do. Maybe it's sending an email afterwards and saying, "Hey, I came to your talk last week about blah, 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 and I'm wondering if maybe there's an opportunity that we could partner together," or, whatever that might look like.
I actually did, just this morning. I I'm lucky enough to be, good friends with the person who runs one of the conferences that I go to every year, and they just put out their call for speakers. So just this
Yeah.
morning, I texted him like, "Hey, let me know if there's anything specific y'all are looking for from your speakers
Yes.
this year. Like, is there a topic that you guys are really hoping someone covers that might be in my wheelhouse?" So that way, it's not me guessing, like,
Yes.
what are they looking for? What can I submit that's gonna get chosen? It's like, "Hey, what can I submit that's gonna get chosen?"
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when you know the people and that's another great thing is when you go to these different events, there's always organizers, right?
Mhm.
And those organizers, when they're at the event, they're like, "Thank goodness the event is here and soon it's gonna be over with," right? But they're also already thinking about next year's or
Yeah.
2 years from now, right? If it's larger conferences, you probably that conference team for the next year or 2 years out is probably there just in observation and feedback mode, right? So connect with those folks. This is another great utilization for AI as well, and I will do this too, is have AI tools, you can prompt the tools, go out there, look at the agenda and the speaker and topic list from the last, 2 to 3 years of events or, 5 years of events. Maybe, 5 years is kind of long in most industries. But what are the topics that people are talking about? What is nobody talking about in the last
Mm.
1 to 2 years? What are the topics that are relevant to this audience that people aren't talking about? And that oftentimes becomes kind of like the seeds, to germinate of like, this might be a great proposal if I don't have a connection, like you said. If I have a direct connection, that's a great piece. If you know who's going to be reviewing those proposals or like the types of topics, oh, we really want to get into this, right? That's awesome. But you can also use an AI tool as kind of a mining tool as well.
And I can only imagine how much you do for follow-up if knowing everything that you do in prep. So, is there any tips for either follow-up or even, like, adding in a call to action, like, turning the speaking event into something more? Like, what do you do? What do you suggest?
Yeah, I never used to do this, but I always I well, I shouldn't say always, almost always have some type of continuation sort of thing, right? It's super easy these days to like have a QR code that redirects people back to just a nice, soft, basic landing page with maybe an additional, whether you do coaching, hey, here's a 30 minutes, free coaching thing. Here's an additional workshop. Here's an ebook, whatever it is in terms of content. And then what you're doing is you're getting those folks if you have an email list, if you wanna redirect people to your LinkedIn, if whatever it is, that sort of stuff to me, that call to, continue to engage, right, is a big deal. And to me, every single time, I do that, right, and I see, like, all the phones and the tablets go up, I'm like, "Okay, boom, like, this is working." People respond to that sort of stuff because, again, it's like we have this desire as human beings. If we like and we resonate with the topic, if we like and we resonate with the speaker, we want to continue to be in that energy and that relationship. And so if you give people a call to action, awesome. It also generates you a potential book of business, right? And so, I mean, if there's people, again, I think about it all the time of when I go into an audience, I'm like, if I get 1 or 2 business engagements from this, everything, all of the effort and all of the expense, time, money, energy, whatever, that's totally paid for, right? So I think definitely always have some type of call to action. The call to action shouldn't be, okay, great. Does anybody have any questions for me? Cool, thanks, right? Like that's part of your presentation. That's not the end. Like the end is let's keep it going. And here's the way to keep it going. So I would encourage everybody out there is like, what does that look like for you? Whether it's a personal touch point, it's a bonus thing, whatever. And I always tell people too is like, I've done things with, like a QR code on the screen and it's like a 2 hour, QR code. It's not going to work if you don't do it right now, right? So I mean, you're
Ooh,
giving people urgency too. And then, it's not one of these like, "Oh yeah, let me reconnect with that speaker from the conference last week." No, I want you to like get on this right now.
I love that. Yeah, a lot of people that were at this conference, that I just got back from were doing things very timely, and it's like, "I'm only taking one person, so make sure that you're scanning it,"
Yeah.
or "This offer ends after, like, midnight tonight," and stuff, and I've never done that, like, someone came up to me and they're like, "I really wanna do your program, but I also wanna do this other program. I don't know if I can do them both, like, how long does this offer
Yeah,
last?" And I'm just like, "Honestly, call me when you're ready and tell me you were here and the event
totally.
pricing, like, I'll still honor it." Is there like what's better to do? Like, am I doing it right or am I doing it wrong? Now I'm just getting
I
free
think
advice.
yeah, no, I think all of the above.
Yeah,
I mean, it's really I mean, the age-old concepts of supply and demand, right? Urgency is what sits in the middle of that. And the question is do I want to create like if I'm creating urgency, what's the purpose? Because I don't wanna create urgency just to make people panic, and I mean, there are some people out there, I want people to panic and I want them to give me their money. That's not me, right? Like, I
exactly.
want people If it's something like, the scenario that you just put out there, somebody's weighing 2 options and they both have a cost to them, and they're looking at, like, the time, money impact sort of, "Is this better? Is this better?" I don't want somebody to just throw money at me and then be like, "Oh, shoot, that was not the best idea. This was not what I needed. This isn't gonna serve me." Because then they're gonna be in your program, they're gonna be doing the thing, and either they're not gonna show up, they're going to show up unwillingly, they're gonna show up and be like, "This is a poor use of my time and money and my resources." And now all of a sudden, that person is absolutely not into your brand anymore. They're not into your message anymore. So if I'm creating urgency, it needs to be real urgency, meaning like I legitimately only have 10 spots,
Yeah.
and so you do need to act quickly, or this starts next week. And so we need to get everybody on board because we have to do pre-messaging sort of stuff. If there's no need for urgency, don't make people panic. Like there's enough other stuff in the world that people are panicking about, and legitimate panic, like legitimate concerns. This world that we live in of flash sale, right? Like that's just because people want people to put their money into your pocket. I can get behind that, right? I certainly, I look at the stuff that shows up in my Gmail inbox, my personal email, and it's like, yep, I get flash sale. That catches me pretty often, right?
Yep.
But if you're creating urgency for no real purpose other than to take other people's money, I don't know about that.
No, I love that. I actually came out of the finance world, and I am an accredited financial counselor, and that comes with that fiduciary,
Yes.
responsibility, and
Yes.
I actually carry that through with everything that I do, and
Yeah.
it's been more than once where I've turned down business. Someone came to me very recently, and they're like, "I wanna do your launch program," which is podcast launch in 5 episodes, "and we'll decide after those 5 episodes, like, if the show's performing and if we wanna continue with the podcast," and I'm like, "Then no." Because a podcast is not gonna be performing in 5 episodes.
No.
And most of what you paid for is me spending the time building out the strategy and, like, the long-term goals of it and all of this, and it's like, if you're spending this big upfront, like, investment just with the mindset of, like, I might quit after episode 5, there's so many better things you can do with your money, and I will not take it. Like, I
Yeah.
need to know that even if it's not continuing to pay me to produce your show, like, I'll give you all your content and you could produce it yourself. I just need to know that, like, you're going to do that so
Yeah.
that I know your money is being spent the right way.
And I love that. I mean, hearing you say that, I'm like, there's there's a responsibility and an ethic to that feels, I don't know. I mean, it can feel kind of rare these days, and to me, like if two experiences are pretty much absolutely on par with one another, and then you bring forward exactly what you just said, which is like I have this fiduciary responsibility and this ethic and this ethos about the way that I do business, I am absolutely going that route. And I think most people would, right? So I mean, like I love that because there's, again, genuineness, honesty, transparency, not just I'm here to make all sorts of money, right? I mean, there's nobody out there that's like, yeah, I don't care about making money, right? I mean, people say that. I'm like, false, false.
Yeah, you can't pay your mortgage with good feelings
Right,
as
right.
much as I wish we
Yeah.
could.
Yep. I got a lot of those. So yeah, it's not helping out.
Yes. Is there any last piece of advice for people who want to be public speakers, want to get on bigger stages, better stages? Last piece of advice that I did not ask for.
I think the biggest piece of advice is you just gotta put yourself in different spaces, right? Whether that is, if you live in a small town and it's giving a presentation at like a Rotary Club, or going in and talking to, kids about your career, whatever it is, you gotta start somewhere, right? Podcasting, public speaking, conferences, thinking about your industries, thinking about your interests, you know, uh, uh, gathering community groups, you just have to start somewhere, right? Everybody start small and you do repeatable things over and over again, right? And that is going to be the stuff that manifests into those larger opportunities. So I would just say just get yourself out there.
I love that, and I wanna add one thing from something you said before when you were talking about, like, sending in those applications to speak at conferences, and if you have a topic you're really excited about and a presentation you've built out that you're really excited about, and you do get that no, you can still do that presentation. Make
Bingo.
your own stage, turn that presentation into a webinar, and
Yep.
invite the same type of audience that would be at that conference. Creating our own stages is so important, especially at the beginning of our speaking career, because we're not necessarily being handed stages from other people. And you have to make your own opportunities sometimes. So I just wanted to
Yeah.
add in that little
No,
little
that's
advice
beautiful.
nugget.
One of my greatest friends says, "Don't ask for a seat at the table, bring your own chair,"
I love
and I'm
that.
like, "Yes." Yeah.
I love that. So that thank you so much for being here. This has been a lot of fun. I'm excited to have this episode out. And how can people find out more about you, bass fishing, anything that you're doing? How can people get in
Yeah.
touch?
For sure. There's 2 different things that I would offer to folks. I love LinkedIn, and so I'd encourage folks to go ahead and get connected with me on LinkedIn. Mickey Fitch-Collins. Again, you can search Mickey on there, and you'll probably find me. But definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. I am on there all the time. Send me a message, comment on stuff that I have out there. That would be awesome. The other thing that I would love to offer to folks too, speaking of calls to action, if you go to learnit.com/Mickey, so learnit.com/MICKEY. If you go there, you're going to see 2 different things. Number one, I actually host a podcast as well. And so my podcast is going to be on there, Learn It Lounge. You can check that out. That's for learning and development folks, human resource folks. You can check that out. The other thing is, if what I described about the work that I do at Learn It is interesting to you, if you're thinking about like, oh, these classes and workshops on upskilling sound really interesting, we have an offer on there that you can have 45 days for you and up to 20 people on your team or your organization to kind of check out our workshops. And there's no strings attached or anything like that. It's an opportunity to kind of get inside and see a little bit of what we're about. So learnit.com/Mickey.
I love it. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you, Mickey, for being here. And come
You
back
bet.
next week for another My First Stage story.
Awesome. Thanks so much.